Good morning, friends. Welcome back to Coffee and Commiseration with Kay Steinsapir. I have so much to commiserate about today, so I'm so excited to talk to you. This is actually really helping me. I'm totally enjoying this. I look forward to this. I hope someone out there is enjoying this and benefiting from this in some way. I have lots of ideas about what I want to do with this podcast going forward. Namely, that is to bring on a whole variety of guests from all different walks of life. And I'm always just so curious about people, like their story, what has happened to them, what makes them tick. And I'm always trying to learn. And I hope to do a lot of that here. But before I can figure that out, I just because, things are so crazy for me. I mean, living in this temporary space that we're in, I mean, it's great. I like living here, but we have nothing of our own. Like very, very few things. Most of what I'm wearing is like stuff that's like been donated and a few things I picked up, but we left our house with nothing. And like literally just like a change of clothes. We thought we would be back the next day. So, yeah. And now we know that, we're going to have to basically throw away everything in the house. So it's all quite daunting and I feel quite out of sorts. So I have already had a very busy morning. I have a takeout coffee instead of home coffee because things are changing for us. So this morning, I took Eli and Nate to school, and that's quite a journey here. We used to walk to school to Marquez from our house to the elementary school. And now it's all different. It's a rainy day here in Los Angeles, which means that driving becomes even more difficult. Like the roads become more congested. People here just do not know how to drive in the rain. And I don't know how to drive at all. Like my friends know that I hate driving. I can't park. I suck at it. So like driving in the rain for me is like, it's too much, you guys. It's really too much. I grew up in Fresno. My high school was this little rinky-dink high school called Central High School out in the country where you drove, 15 minutes seeing nothing but grape vineyards all around you. And I'm still very much that girl who is in the country in Fresno, even though I've been in this big city now for, I don't know, 20 plus years. I certainly have never gotten used to the traffic or the driving. And I try to stay in like my little areas as much as possible. But that is no longer possible, actually, because of the fires. So this morning, I drove the kids to school. I first drove Eli, and then I drove Nate, and then I drove back home. So it was quite an adventure for me. Oh, and after I dropped Nate off, Nate goes to school in Westwood on the UCLA campus at Geffen. And I dropped Nate off, and then I stopped by the dispensary, the weed shop, which is so funny. I don't do drugs. I'm really, really paranoid about not doing them and never have tried them because I grew up in a family where drug addiction like destroyed people that were very close to me. A lot of my family members, including my mom. So after witnessing that, I've never been interested in trying drugs. So I've only done alcohol and marijuana, and I don't like marijuana either. I don't like the way it makes me feel. But after having cancer, there's a lot of things that these lingering problems that I have from when I had cancer and the treatment. And I still take this medication. That's a really strong medication. So I found this doctor that specializes only in marijuana, which is so interesting and so helpful, actually. Because back when I went through the bulk of my treatment, like the doctors couldn't tell you anything. They were like, we really don't know. We can't tell you what kind to take, how much to take. You just got to figure it out. And obviously you don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Um, so a good friend of mine was going through treatment for glioblastoma, and she sadly passed last year. Um, and she found this doctor who specialized in cannabis and recommended her. So I had a session with her, got a prescription. Now I'm a customer of this dispensary, which is hilarious because I'm like this like 48-year-old mom dropping my kid off at school, and then I'm going in there and there's all these young people. And this place, by the way, these stores, we have a lot of them in LA. But weirdly not in Santa Monica. They're like not allowed there, I don't think, which is odd because they're everywhere else. Um, and it's always packed. Like these places are always busy. This is like a great business for these folks. So I go in there and it's all these young people working there. They often look like they are sampling the merchandise. Like they are pretty out of it sometimes. So today I go in there and I get some new stuff. Like I'm trying to figure out what to get because they don't carry all the things my doctor had suggested. Um, so I got that stuff, and God only knows. God help me. I do not like the feeling of actually being stoned. And a funny story I'll share. I have two stories to share today. One is very funny and one is very sad. And I'm going to start with the funny because I have so many sad stories and I don't want to just completely bum people out. They listen and follow me. So I got a funny one for you. So when I was going through cancer treatment, so I was diagnosed with stage 3B breast cancer in, 2016. Yes, because it was the year Eli was born. It was the year Trump was elected the first time. So it was just like everything felt extremely insane and out of control for me at that time. I'm very involved in politics. I was a huge supporter of Hillary. I still love Hillary, always will love Hillary. So that was quite a devastating time that, I lost my grandfather, who I was incredibly close to. I was raised by my grandparents, and I said I was telling a funny story, and I am. But first, I have to give a little context. In 2016, I just had a baby, I just had Eli. I lost my grandfather. My grandparents raised me. Trump was elected. I was completely blindsided by that. I remember I was breastfeeding Eli, and Molly walked in and she said, "Mom, Donald Trump is winning." And I said, "Oh my God, of course he's not. Like, don't worry, Molly." She was so upset. She was so worried. And this was very early on. I said, "No, no, no. This is just because of the way it's reporting and everything." And I mean, anyway, I digress. So I was diagnosed with cancer in that year. And I went through all of this horrendous treatment, like because my cancer was bad, you guys. It was like really, I had 3 tumors on my breast, all this lymph node involvement. And they told me, they thought before they had the pathology for my cancer, they were like, this has got to be like triple negative or HER2 positive cancer, which are the more aggressive types. Triple negative breast cancer is the most fatal type of breast cancer there is. And it turned out to be neither of those, just extremely crazy estrogen driven cancer, which is why I have to like not have any estrogen in my body, which makes for all kinds of lovely challenges. But I promised a funny story, and here it is. So I knew this woman who had gone through breast cancer before me. And interestingly, and I know people did this with me because this is human nature, right? So I remember when she was going through cancer, and there was another mom at our school at the same time who is now a friend of mine. I remember when they were going through cancer, and they both were bald. They didn't do cold caps. They were totally bald. And the first woman that I mentioned, the teacher at the school, she looked really, really sick. Like, she's also a good friend of mine now. She was really ill. And I remember sitting behind her at a play that our kids were in. And I just was like, oh my gosh, this, it's scary, right? It's scary to see somebody going through like our greatest fears, right? And you kind of just want to, like, you don't know how to act, you don't know how to look, you don't know what to say to them. Um, so I went through that as someone who thought I was perfectly healthy at the time. Turns out I had cancer too. I just didn't know it. It hadn't been diagnosed yet. But then once I was diagnosed, everyone gave me these weird, like, pity looks and avoided me. And it's like we just don't know how to handle these very difficult situations like cancer and the death of a child and all of this. So we get super weird because it scares us and we don't know what to do or what to say, and we don't want to make it worse and all of that. So I have so many things to say in this regard. But the funny story, here it is. So this woman was a kindergarten teacher at school, and she said, I'm going to drop something off at your house that's, to help you. When I was going through my treatment, right? So she drops off a little bag at my house, tiny little white bag, and it had stamp things on it, like smiley face and, like stars and rainbows. And it looked very cute and innocuous. And it was gummies. And what were they? Like little chocolate covered berries or something. And like I said, I have always been very afraid of that kind of stuff. Like, I tried to smoke weed in high school. I really didn't know how. I didn't like it. So I just was never into this, not my thing. Again, I grew up around so much of that. Like, I really didn't want to have it in my life once I got away from home. So anyway, she drops it off. I just stick it in my cupboard, like up where the spices were, like away from where the kids could get it. I just put it up there and I forgot about it. And then fast forward like a few weeks later, I had just had chemo and I was really sick. And I was making dinner for the kids, but I felt awful. So I'm in there, I'm standing there at the stove. Remember, I had put those right up at the spice cabinet, and I saw them there, and I also was hungry, weirdly. I was sick and I was hungry, which is, I don't know, odd. But if you've ever gone through chemo, you might be able to relate to that. Because they give you steroids. That's the thing. They give you steroids when you get the chemo. So it kind of ramps you up for a little bit, and you have trouble sleeping, and sometimes like get your appetite up. So I'm standing there, I feel like shit, I'm making dinner. I realize, oh, those things are there. It's like, it's a chocolate bar and it's these little whatever, like berries or something. So I grab it, I get the chocolate bar, and this thing is it comes in squares. It's like a chocolate bar with 4 squares. Now I ate one of the small things. I ate one of these berries or chocolate beans, whatever that was. I ate one of those and I felt nothing. So I was like, okay, I'm going to eat part of this chocolate bar. And in my defense, there was no information on there about like serving size or anything. It was just, as I recall, could be wrong, it was just like plainly wrapped. So I think that a square, which is a quarter of this bar, is like 1 serving. I mean, I feel like that's a reasonable thing to think. So I pop that in my mouth and eat it. And turns out, actually, that was like way too much for someone my size and who does not use cannabis to be consuming. So I'm making dinner, and then I don't know, at some point it hits me like a ton of bricks. Like, I have this insane experience, and I'm home with the kids by myself, by the way, until John gets home. And so I like, I don't want the kids to know that so in my like completely altered state. Like, I am thinking to myself, like, okay, I have to be normal. And I was very aware of this because I was a child of like drug addicted people. So I was very aware of like keeping my shit together for my kids and not being weird and not doing anything weird. So, I was able to serve dinner, get them doing something, waiting for John, whatever. But inside, I felt really out of it and strange. So next thing I know, fast forward, because when this happens to you, I don't know if you've ever taken too much THC. Uh, your sense of time gets really screwed up. So remember, I was making dinner, so it's like evening time. So John's going to be coming home soon. But to me, it felt like hours, hours. I was sitting on the couch. I was just trying to be very still, very quiet, uh, totally normal. Kids were occupied. I remember Nate was reading a comic book in our. We had this like little bench in the kitchen by the window, and he was sitting there reading comic book. And Molly got in the shower, and to me, it was like he was reading that comic book and she was in the shower for like 4 hours. I was like, what are they doing? Like, what is taking so long? And John came home and I was like, I'm not okay. Like, I'm really not okay. And I mean, even just to like walk to the couch, I was putting my hands, on the walls, just like I didn't even feel like I was like out of my body, you guys, and fucking crazy. So again, time is not normal when you're in this state. So it felt like a long time to me, although it wasn't. So I'm sitting there and he comes in and he said, what? I said, I took this stuff that Elise dropped off, a candy bar. And he's like, oh my God, what did you take? And he starts figuring it out and he figures out how much I took. He's like, this would be enough to make like a 300-pound man, like stoned for a week. Like you took, I don't even know what he said, 50 milligrams or something crazy. He's like, you need to just go lie down in bed right now. And I had Ativan from cancer treatment. They give you like, stuff to calm you down because you're going crazy. So he's like, take some Ativan, lie down in bed. So I was lying down in my bed, totally having like an out of body, horrible experience. Absolutely horrible. It was not a pleasant experience. I felt completely paranoid. I felt totally anxious and awful. And oh my God, these stories that I'm going to tell you actually dovetail. So I'm lying on my bed, and at the time I was doing acupuncture with this lady named Lucy Postolov, this Russian woman. Very Lucy, I adore Lucy. She is a very very blunt, very strong-willed, like no nonsense Russian woman. And she recorded a hypnosis tape for me, and I was listening to this hypnosis tape trying to calm down. I'm listening to she has a Russian accent, so I'm listening to her with her Russian accent. And our cat Leroy was next to me, and he was biting me, like he was trying to. I don't know. Leroy was a crazy cat. He was like biting me for some reason, and I was thinking to myself as I'm listening to Lucy. Molly's still in the shower, and I'm like, how in the hell is she still in the shower? And when is John going to come in here and like help me, because I need him to help me with this crisis that I'm experiencing. And Leroy is biting my hand. And I remember you guys literally thinking like, okay, I'm still alive. Like I'm still here because I feel that pain in my hand where he's biting me. Oh my God. So, I mean, this just went on. It was an absolute nightmare all night for me. I vowed I was never going to touch this stuff ever again. And that tells you how desperate I've been with like the pain that I have left over from this cancer, because, I have this horrible chronic pain in my hand, which is so weird, but I do. I have nerve damage in my hand, and they've done surgery on it. They've given me every kind of drug. Nothing has worked. But the cannabis somewhat helps. So, again, despite my horrific, Maureen Dowd level nightmare with marijuana, I have given it another try, and I'm very careful about the dosages. I take the slightest amount. I have become much more mindful. But now it's very funny. I'm like the mom going into the weed shop, like at 8:30 a.m. after dropping my kids at school. Oh Oh my God. So that has been my morning. And that is my funny story for you. When I took an insane amount of THC and had the worst night of my life during cancer. Not the worst night of my life, but maybe the worst night up to that point. Anyway, so I mentioned Leroy. I didn't realize that these stories kind of dovetailed, but they do. So I mentioned Leroy and how he was biting me and how I thought, okay, I'm still here because I can feel that. And yesterday I told you that our cat Leroy wasn't doing well. And then after I recorded that episode, I got a phone call from my brother-in-law, Noah, who's been taking care of Leroy for us for the last month since we've been in this temporary place. Because this place doesn't allow a cat. Leroy is sick. We have our dog who chases him all the time. And our family have been hosting Leroy. And it's been amazing because they completely fell in love with him. My niece and nephew are little, and they've never had a pet. And my brother-in-law hasn't had a pet since he was a kid. And they just absolutely fell in love with Leroy. And he has had the greatest month. He truly lived up to his name. Leroy we named him that because for two reasons. My grandfather that I mentioned, Papa, JD, he used to call Nate Leroy because he could never remember the name Nate. I don't know why, but he would just call him Leroy as a nickname. And also Leroy in French, it means the king. And Leroy has always lived up to that name. He has been with us for 13 years since he was a kitten. I've had pets my entire life. I've always had cats. I've always had dogs and more things. Like when I grew up in Fresno, I had everything. I had rabbits. I had a duck. I had, what do they call those? Ferrets. I was going to say a lemur, but that's not right. Ferrets. I had a ferret for a bit. I had hamsters. I had an ant farm. My grandfather was a zoo director in Fresno, and we just have it in the blood, in my family. We all love animals, and Molly especially loved animals, all animals. Anyway, so Leroy has just been absolutely our family and such a joy for us all these 13 years. And in the last month, he's been a real joy for our family, for our brother-in-law and sister-in-law and their kids. And so now they realize how much they were missing not having a pet. And so now, they're going to get a pet of their own. So anyway, Leroy has not been doing well. And my brother-in-law called me yesterday and said he's really not doing well. And so after I recorded that episode, I jumped in the car, I went straight there, and I hadn't eaten anything. I have this problem of when I'm stressed and busy, I will forget to eat. I will just realize oh my God, it's 2:00 and I haven't eaten anything. So I do usually eat breakfast. So I ate some breakfast in the morning, but very early. So by the time I went out to their house, they live an hour away. The time I got there, it was late afternoon. So we spent a lot of time together with Leroy, and he really wasn't doing well. As background, he started to have some symptoms I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months ago. He started sneezing a lot, which is odd, right? And he started sneezing, and then a little blood came out. And so I took him to the vet, and initially they said it was nothing. They checked him out, they said it was nothing. And then, it kept happening. So I took him again, and they said, oh, he has a mass in his nostril. So I had to take him to another place to evaluate that. And they said, it seems like it's probably cancer. If it is cancer, the option would be to give radiation. I've been through radiation. I know how much it sucks. And if it would have helped and given him, quality time, I absolutely would have done it. But I knew that was not going to be the case. So, we said, okay, we're not going to do that anyway. So we're just going to, they gave him medicine that helped him a lot in the short term. He got considerably better with the steroid that they gave him, and other things we were doing for him. So it turned out, so of course, a steroid is not going to cure cancer, and we, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law had been taking him to the vet there. They said the same thing. It's likely cancer, and if you were to do anything, it would be radiation, which we don't recommend because it's not going to give him significant more time, and it's not going to be quality of life for him. So we've all known for a bit that we probably were not going to have a lot more time left with Leroy, but we were trying to keep him comfortable and enjoy him and have him enjoy his life as much as possible. And my God, he enjoyed the last month. They were literally going and buying like wild salmon and sauteing it for him. He had no Dax chasing him around. This cat lived literally like a king, and it was so sweet to see. And we've been, of course, going out there and visiting on the weekends and stuff. So it's been great. But yesterday, after spending a couple hours out there and watching him struggle to breathe and struggle to eat, we knew we had to put him to sleep. He was having a lot of blood coming out of his nose and everything. So it was time. So I did it. I took him to the vet, to an emergency, animal hospital. And I went by myself, and it was so hard. It was awful, you guys. I sat with him and, held him for a long time and talked to him, told him how grateful we are to have had him as our cat and Molly's cat for so many years. And he's been such a part of our life. And losing Leroy is like losing a connection to Molly. And so that is really, really hard for all of us. And the timing is really interesting because we're, what is today? Today is 13th. I lose track of time now. We said goodbye to Molly on February 15th, 4 years ago. So this is right in the middle of the worst time of year for us of loss and grief. And so I sat with him for a long time and talked to him. And, eventually the doctor had to come in and administer the medicine. Fortunately, it wasn't sterile, this place. It was very comfortable. It was sitting on a couch. I was holding him in a blanket, and I had my hand. Leroy was never a big cat, and he's definitely wasn't now because he had lost weight. So I had my hand on him the whole time. And while they were administering the drugs and the syringe in his IV, I had my hand on him, and I closed my eyes. And the whole time I was just bringing Molly in and asking her to come and get her kitty, just to come and get Leroy. And I said, Molly, he's coming. And I know she was there. I know she was there to get him. And I know she's happy. I pulled up yesterday in front of a beauty supply store, and it was called Molly's Beauty. And I kind of felt like she was saying, I'm here, Mom, and don't worry about Leroy, I'm here. And last night, Nate had a dream of Molly and Leroy. So I thought that was really special and comforting as well. God, but it was a really, really difficult day. And I walked out of there just sobbing and talking to John on the phone. John has a big court hearing today, and he's about to start a trial. He and Nate were out there just over the weekend. Eli was sick, and so they went out there without us. And so they just saw Leroy, and they knew that it was coming, that he didn't have a lot more time left. So they felt like they had said goodbye. And Eli said goodbye to him on FaceTime when we were still at his cousin's house. So it was really, really tough. And hadn't eaten, as I said, right? So by now I've gone all day essentially without eating. And so I realized I had to eat something. And the only thing around there was a Taco Bell. So I'm like a complete wreck. I'm crying my eyes out. I don't want to eat anything at all, but it's kind of like when I was going through that chemo, it's like I feel awful, but I also feel like I need to eat something, and I don't want to eat, but I need to eat. And so they must have thought, what on earth is wrong with this lady? She's hysterical. I mean, I wasn't hysterical, but I was crying, had been crying a lot and was crying. Fortunately, it was a thing like a kiosk where you put in your order. I've never done that at a talk. I don't eat fast food that much. So I had never done that before at a place. So I got to just put my order in the kiosk and then drive an hour home. And oh God, just what a day. So that's my sad story, that we had to say goodbye to Leroy. Um, yeah. And, losing a pet is losing a family member. It's another form of grief, right? And a lot of people became familiar with Leroy recently because of the fires. So what happened was, when so that day, now I'm going to try not to be too long-winded about this, because I'm already at 31 minutes and there's so much to say about the fire, but I'm going to mention this just because I'm sure some people are going to say, what about Leroy and the fires? Because people became aware of him. I think a lot of people who followed me already knew of Leroy, but some people became aware of him because of the fire. So what happened was, that day, Nate and I were coming back from school interview, way across town. We were driving to Palisades. We saw smoke, and this is very early on. So we see the smoke coming from the Palisades Highlands, and there are brush fires in the Highlands pretty often. Like, we've lived in the Palisades since Nate was a baby, so like 13 years, and it's not that uncommon that we have a brush fire in the Palisades, especially in the Highlands. So we see the smoke. I say to Nate, should we go and get Eli from school? And my thought was, I don't want him to be breathing in the smoke at lunchtime. It wasn't that I thought they were going to close the school or that he was in danger. I just thought, well, the air quality is going to be bad and we're already in the car, so let's get him. So we do. And the school's not being evacuated or anything. So we get him, we go home. I see my neighbor across the street, and she's like, yeah, we're going to leave. Like, there's too much smoke, we're going to leave. So I was like, yeah, I think we'll leave too. Again, this is something we've done, quite a few times. So I had the kids grab a change of clothes. I grabbed a change of clothes. And that was it. Like, we didn't take anything. I didn't take any of Molly's things. I mean, I didn't take any sentimental items. I didn't take anything. And it just so happened, we have a housekeeper named Sylvia, who is part of our family as well, who's been with us also since Nate was born. And she was working for my neighbor across the street. And she came to me, which, she's always looking out for us, and we're always looking out for her. So she came to me and she said, come on, Kay, hurry up, because she knows I have this bad hand. So she started helping me put stuff in the car. And I said, oh my God, what am I going to do? Do I try to find Leroy? Leroy doesn't feel well. He's hiding. I've got to get like all of his stuff, a carrier. I don't know where it is. I've got to get his litter and litter box and all, etc. And the dog chases Leroy all around. And I'm like, what do I do? Do I grab him? And she said, no, I'm going to be here tomorrow. I'm going to feed him. This is what we were thinking. I was like, okay, all right. And so we leave. And again, this is before there's an evacuation order. There's a lot of smoke, and we see the smoke is coming, and it's concerning, but never in a million years did I think homes close to me were going to be burning, or that my home was in danger of burning. Like, you never think things are going to happen to you until they do. You don't think your child's going to go out riding a bike and fall off and hit her head and die. You don't think your neighborhood is going to burn down. You don't think your neighbors are going to lose their home. You don't think you might lose your home. You just don't. I just absolutely didn't think that was at all in the realm of possibility. So we leave. We go down, and getting in and out of Palisades is a little hard. It's not a lot of ways in and out of there. So we're going, and the traffic starts really backing up. I can see by the time we finally get down that the school is being evacuated. But by now, as I'm going out, I'm barely getting out, right? Like, it's getting to, I didn't know this, but at the time up in the Highlands where this fire started, people were already abandoning their cars because they couldn't drive. They were just stuck. which turned out to be a huge problem because then the firefighters couldn't get in there to fight the fire, but they also couldn't do anything. So they got out and abandoned their cars. So by the time I realized, fuck, I should get Leroy, I need Leroy, I couldn't get back. And again, I was out before there was any evacuation order. So I said, oh my God, I have to put this out. I have to get everybody I know to possibly, who can possibly get him to get him. And so I did. I put it on social media and I got a neighbor, this guy, Alex, who used to walk our dog Calvin, who used to always ask out our au pair and our niece on dates. I got Alex to go to the house, use my spare key, get Leroy. It was all okay. But in the meantime, I posted this. And of course, people have a lot to say about, you left him there, you're a horrible person, you left him to die. Of course, I would never leave Leroy to die. Like, absolutely not. And I'm saying this because, in hindsight, I made the right decision. John and I have talked about this, and he's like, you made the right decision, right? Like, you could not have gotten him and all of his accoutrements and all of this shit into the car. Not to mention the fact that we were going to a place that we couldn't bring him. I don't know how that would have worked out, but certainly if I'd known there was a true fire risk, I would have just found a way. Even if I had to sleep in my car with him, I would have slept in the car with him. But that's not what I thought was happening. I thought we would have smoke damage, maybe like the smell of smoke. Again, we've had that before. So I mention this to say that, like, it's so easy to criticize people from behind a screen. And in this case, I made the right decision, because if I had tried to take him, we would have gotten stuck. I would have been walking with the children and the dog and the cat and everything and all of our stuff, like trying to walk somewhere to safety. Like, it's insane. And we really, really believe, everyone has their own beliefs, but like for me, I know that Molly saved our house. She saved our house and she saved Leroy. I talked to her all that night of the fire. I talked to her and I summoned her, like, as her mother. I summoned her. I said, Molly, like, literally, I didn't sleep. Like, I was just like, I need you. I need you. I need you. Please get Leroy. Please get Leroy. Our kids were hysterical about him. I was hysterical about him. We cared about him more than we cared about the house. By 1,000 times, we didn't care about the house. We cared about getting him. So I talked to her all night, and I knew in my bones that if there is any afterlife, if there is any spiritual connection with me and Molly, that she would do it. And then when I saw all the neighborhood, burnt the way it burnt, and just a few houses standing, I was like, oh my God. And then we saw our house standing, and I mean, it burnt up to the side, it burnt in the back, it burnt around it, and our house was untouched by fire. And Leroy was fine, and Alex got him, and it was not a problem. But so many people, of course, like to be critical, right? And I feel I definitely made the right decision, but it's possible, you guys, that I could have made the wrong call. Like, very possible I could have made the wrong call, because we're human and you're operating with limited information, trying to make a decision one way or the other about something, and you don't always have perfect visibility into things, and you don't have perfect information, and sometimes you make what in hindsight is the wrong decision. And imagine how much worse I would feel if I had made the wrong decision and I hadn't been able to get him. And all of these people attacked me. I mean, it's like, we just should not do that to people. And I eventually figured out the source of, so much of that vitriol was because of, anti-Israel, anti-Jewish accounts picked it up. And, some of those accounts were experiencing what is that word? Schadenfreude, like where you are happy when other people are suffering. They wanted our towns to burn down. They wanted us to lose things or homes and whatever. And they enjoyed seeing my suffering, and they have enjoyed seeing my suffering for a long time. So that's nothing new. So once I figured out, oh God, it's because of them, I certainly didn't take it seriously. I wasn't really that concerned to begin with. But I shared a video of our street, and I hadn't even listened to the audio when I shared it. I just saw the street and shared the video. And the woman I don't even know who that woman was, somebody, a neighbor. And the woman in there was panicking. She was frantic. She was distraught because her house was destroyed. And people thought that was me, and it wasn't. But I mean, who cares if it was? Like, someone's distraught. Like, why don't you have some fucking compassion for people? Anyway, yeah. So that was the whole situation. Even our au pair's family heard about, saw my video. They live in Italy, and they forwarded it to her, not knowing it was me. They're like, look, this woman lost her cat. And she's like, that's my cat. That's my family. So I have a lot to share with you about our au pair as well. I'm going to talk to you about that maybe next time. We've had a very interesting year and a half, living with a very devout Muslim au pair. And the reason I think her family, and everybody saw that is because it was picked up by these Free Palestine accounts that shared it. So very interesting story about the year and a half we've had living together in such interesting times, and how we came through it together and learned a lot from each other. And I think overall, it's a really beautiful, positive story. And we are incredibly sad to see her leave us. And you would not have imagined that given how it started. Anyway, so that's my story today. I thank you all. I hope if you're still listening, God bless. Thank you. And I have lots more to share tomorrow. I hope you join me again. Have a great day.